AskReddit. What is the dumbest rule your school ever had? Back when cell phones weren't really what they are now, if you got caught with it, the principal would take it for the rest of the semester. Well, sure enough, I got my phone confiscated, and my mom went in there raising hell. She told them they don't pay the cell phone bill and that holding it for months was basically theft. They ended up changing the rule after that. I honestly don't know what they were thinking. Around the time Pink Floyd's The Wall came out, students were forbidden from playing Another Brick in the Wall PT2 on school grounds. Students got a letter to give to their parents from the school superintendent. He felt the lyrics, "We don't need no education and hey, teacher, leave those kids alone" were evolutionist, and anybody playing the song was considered a dissident by the school superintendent. This is 4th, 5th, and 6th graders we're talking about here. Parents had a field day, citing all sorts of free speech violations. Superintendent was fired at the end of the school year. If you were late to school at all, you'd need your parent to sign you into school. And obviously anyone with 2 working parents would see this as the idea that if you're even a few seconds late, you have to ditch completely. In the 6th grade, 2 girls were caught arguing with each other in the bathroom. They were literally just arguing about which Backstreet Boy was hotter or something. So the logical course of action was for the school to ban all arguing. And if you got caught disagreeing with another student, it was automatic detention. I still can't wrap my head around it. We wore uniforms that were ordered from a magazine provided by the school. If our uniform skirts looked to be too short, they were measured with a ruler. Thin girls who wore a smaller size had slightly shorter skirts than everyone else. So we were constantly being sent to the principal's office for wearing the uniforms they required us to wear. During middle school, the locker room lockers weren't allowed to be used because some students leave food in there. Surprise, surprise, a lot of people got their shit stolen, and the administration didn't give a single fuck. The school did nothing about it until a pet teacher got his iPod stolen. Then they started having people monitor the locker room occasionally, but theft still occurred. When I was in high school, one of my classmates was diagnosed with cancer. As a form of fundraising to help his family, some students/parents organized a t-shirt sale at the school where all the proceeds went to his family. Pretty much everyone ordered one, and the day they came in we all put them on over our usual uniform shirts. Later that day the principal came on the PA to say we all had to take the shirts off because visitors were coming to the school and he didn't want them to think we had substandard uniform regulations. For a school that preaches family, I thought that was completely ridiculous and kind of insulting. We had to sign out to go to the bathroom, but if we signed out over 3 times a quarter, 9 weeks, we would get a grade deduction. Our school had a uniform with a shirt as part of it. One year they switched the color to white shirts from navy, but because they had a cheap supplier, they were pretty see-through. As a result, every female student's bra was visible. Instead of acknowledging their mistake and changing the color back, or just switching to a uniform manufacturer that didn't use fabric as thin as tissue paper, they implemented a bunch of rules about what color underwear girls were allowed to wear. It was only for girls too. A boy with a blue undershirt was fine, but a girl with a blue bra, heavens no. Everyone thought it was stupid, including many parents, but the official line was, if you wore tasteful clothes, this wouldn't be an issue. Having a rule that forces male teachers to comment on the bras of girls as young as 13 is pretty messed up, especially when many of these children didn't even get to buy their own clothes, but relied on their parents. We could not sit on the ground. The reason for this was that people would have sex, because that's exactly what happens when children sit on the ground. If you drove to school, you had to park your car at least 1 kilometer away from the campus, apparently so that the school would not be liable in the event that you died in a car crash. We weren't allowed to bring playing cards of any sort to school because it would look like we were gambling. This was when cell phones were just getting popular, so elementary school kids started having them, and schools had no idea how to adapt to this. Our school made a rule: everyone with a cell phone had to drop this in a bag at the principal's office before school, and then pick it up after school was over. Gamma boys were also similarly confiscated. So yes, Picture people having to line up to drop their Nokias and Gamma Boys into a bag at the start of every day. Naturally, at one point, the bag and all its contents got stolen. No reading during lunch. Lunch is for friends, so you can talking during lunch and not class. We would have to take books away from students who were reading. It was awful for the loner kids. You had 2 minutes to get from one class to the next. Sounds good on paper until you realize we had one-way halls only, and if your next class was on the other side of the school, you were pretty much fucked. If you were late to class, you had to go to detention the entire period. What made this rule more fucking stupid was that you couldn't take your backpack into class, so you had to put it into your locker. So between each class, you had to put your books away and get your other books for the next class, eating up your time to get to the next class. Eventually the school got rid of the time rule and the backpack rule when they realized how stupid it was. I taught at a school where students couldn't be in the hallways during lunch for any reason at all. My last week there, my students wanted to throw me a going away party in my classroom during lunch. I told them it wasn't necessary, but they insisted, which I thought was a nice gesture. About 5 minutes into lunch no students had stopped by, and when I went into the hallway they were standing there in front of another teacher who was telling them they couldn't go to my room. When I politely approached my colleague and explained the situation, she tried to stand steadfast and tell me no. Even after I told her they had permission and they'd be under my supervision the entire time, she still said no. Finally, knowing it was my last week, I told my students to go to my room anyway because I wasn't having this shit, and it wasn't fair to my students who'd spent a lot of money on a cake. My colleague went and told our boss, who pretty much just ignored her. It was the Pokemon craze of 1997. Teachers were sick of students being so distracted by Pokemon. They banned cards and anything related to Pokemon at our school. If we uttered the word Pokemon we'd be suspended. We called them pocket monsters instead. Teacher didn't get it. My elementary school took the safety first rule to mean that anything where someone got hurt became banned. This meant that any popular game inevitably got banned after a few days. After the conventional games like basketball, soccer, tag, etc. got banned, we were left with safe games. Then they banned yo-yoing after a kid got hit with one, invisible sword fights, jump ropes. Once they banned all physical activities, things started to be banned for causing emotional harm. TCGs, Magic, Pokemon, slumber party games, Mayfair, Detective. It became a game in itself to see how quickly you could get something banned. They wondered why kids couldn't pay attention in class. Zero tolerance. Any fight or schoolyard scuffle resulted in both parties being suspended regardless of the circumstance. One kid could walk up to another kid and punch him in the face without warning or explanation and both get suspended. Brilliant. My dad actually told me to fight back as hard as I wanted after I told him my friend got suspended for something like that. If you're getting suspended regardless of who's at fault, punch the guy in his face. You'll still be in trouble, but at least you'll give as good as you get for it. Not a permanent rule, but we had dress up days for homecoming. In my area, at least, Thursday was always toga day for the seniors. So we had toga day and all the seniors were sitting in first period when an administrator came in. He told us we had to change because we were showing our shoulders. They approved toga day. Do they not know what togas are? I went to a private high school. They had a ton of stupid rules. In the driving section it stated that students were not permitted to park their vehicles on top of school buildings. The only way you could get anything on those roofs was with a crane. My favorite rule was no running on school grounds, including sports fields. The rule was removed after students realized that it would be breaking the rules to play any sport above walking pace. Hilarity ensued as prefects started handing out detentions at the finishing line in our annual school Olympics. We had a rule in our dining hall where you weren't allowed to move seats again after you'd sat down at the first one. To this day I have no idea why, but it was official and clearly written down. Not too rigorously enforced, mind you. Also, they briefly banned talking at my junior school's dining hall. For a 6-year-old this was genuinely very oppressive, keeping in mind how much stricter and more aggressive teaching practices were in the early 1990s. It's also worth noting that many of my teachers at that time were middle-aged or nearing retirement, hence they had their teaching heyday in the 1960s and 1970s where you could be shot for not doing your homework. Some parents complained, and the ban was lifted. For more high quality AskReddit videos check out the YouTube channel Reddit Today. Link is in the description.